Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to our library program tonight about how to be an unlikely ally. This is a program from St. Mary's County Library. This fall, we've been running a series of programs called Community Conversations on Race. And we've been looking at it from different angles, like using art or open discussions. Here we have a panelist discussion where we'll be talking about a TED Talk today by Nita Mosby Tyler, named "If You Want Justice, Be an Unlikely Ally." And tonight we have, first of all, we do have chat and question and answer, the Q&A that you should see on the bottom of your screen. If you have questions for the panelists, please put those in the Q&A. If you have technical problems, you can put those in the chat, and one of us will be able to help you with that. And if you want to change your chat so that everyone can see it, that enables on your end. Okay, let me add this note to our program. I just got a notice that all right, I'll fix that in just a minute. Okay, let me introduce Christine Bergmark. She is our facilitator tonight. She has facilitated such other events as the big conversations in Calvert County and in St. Mary's County. She has also facilitated the Shut Up and Listen discussions. She holds the license for TEDx Great Mills. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine and Catherine and Aaron and St. Mary's County Library for hosting this session tonight. We have three wonderful panelists. And as Christine said, I'm going to introduce our panelists, and you'll have an opportunity to watch the TED Talk. It's about 10 minutes. And then we'll come back for questions with our panelists. So any of you that have questions or want to make comments, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A box. That will be great. So I'm going to start off with our three panelists. I have Nikki Phillips. Nikki, want to raise your hand there? Nikki is an adjunct communication professor. She's taught communication and culture classes at the college level for more than 16 years. She has her own business called the Professional Communication Training, where she works with a variety of organizations to help them work together. So welcome, Nikki.
Thank you.
And then José Ballesteros. José is a writer, professor, and director of equity program at St. Mary's College of Maryland. And so welcome very much, José. I'd love to have you here. Loving having you here. And Marsha Williams. Marsha is a partner with the law firm Williams, McClellan and Stack LLC. She's a wife and a mother of one, and she's been a resident of St. Mary's County since 2002. So with that, Christine, I'll head back to you to show our TED Talk.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Such a powerful talk, and such a talk that we've been having in our community, for quite some time now. So thank you, St. Mary's County Library, for hosting this tonight. So Nita Mosby Tyler starts out saying, people are just sick and tired of fighting for justice. She tells us her personal story, and she asks why other people aren't standing up. Why is it that the white parents in that ballet didn't stand up and say, hey, let everybody dance. Let all children dance in this ballet. Why aren't white patrons in restaurants standing up to say, go ahead, let them eat here? And why is it that, in churches, heterosexuals aren't necessarily standing up when they hear homophobic comments, or the same thing with boomers and millennials? She talks about how justice requires an accomplice and needs the unlikely ally. And that, when the same people, I love this, when the same people speak up in the same way they've always spoken up, the most we get is the same results over and over and over again. And she asks, what if an unlikely ally were to lead out? What if Black and Native Americans stood out in front of immigration, or white people lead the race to end racism, and men led the charge to encourage pay equity for women, and heterosexual people stood up for LGBTQ issues? Able-bodied stood up for people living with disabilities, even when those issues don't have anything to do with us. She says, people facing injustice have to be willing to accept the help, that it's collective and it requires everyone to be all in. and that when we add our voice and our action to situations we don't think have anything to do with us, we inspire others to do the same. And that we all need to stand up, speak up, even when it's hard or we feel out of place. And she ends with justice counts on all of us. So powerful. And so I'm going to lead off with some questions for the panelists. And again, I encourage anybody listening and to chime in. But our first question is, tell us a story, or do you have a story about seeing or being an unlikely ally?
I can start. So I love that she talks about gender and generation and all the areas that can kind of make us feel like outsiders or not belonging. And so as a college professor, I felt like we don't really have too many millennials anymore. Generation Z is kind of coming up into my world. But I felt really bad for the millennials when all of that was going on, and it was the generation me, and I was listening in the faculty room about, oh, they're just so self-centered and and I really did start to kind of like stand up for that. I am not that generation. I'm not that far removed, but I'm not that generation. But I did kind of feel like, we were all floundering 19-year-olds too, and I certainly was not getting everything done on time, and I'm sure I had some stupid excuses for why I couldn't, but I really felt like I did start kind of sticking up for them in the faculty room, and I don't think it was anything hard or difficult, but I did see it other places too, and I'd worked with different companies, and it was, oh, the millennials are hard to train. Well, they're also new, and it's hard, and maybe they don't know how to, they've never used a fax machine before. When would they have? So I was just trying to approach it from let's keep an open mind and be patient and remember where we were when we were their age. And that's, across all cultures, generations, all of those things. That's kind of a little bit of a unifier.
Yeah, so speaking up for the generational divides.
Yeah, without making the other side feel bad. I mean, it is frustrating, in that kind of a situation, but I don't necessarily think, and I don't think any of her examples are really about anybody making anybody else feel bad. I think it's about calling attention to it and saying, I see this is not right, and so how can we work together to move forward? That's something that I took away from all of her examples and the rhythm of her presentation.
Right, she was never critical. She just said, why aren't we standing up? And when we do, we inspire others to do so, and that it requires all of us, all in collective action. Yeah. How about Jose or Marcia? Any thoughts or examples from you, and when you might have either seen or been an unlikely, or seen or been an unlikely ally?
Being an unlikely ally, I had to think about that. There have been occasions where I've been surprised that people have stood up for something that I believed in, fighting injustice given their either class or race, or just coming from a different neighborhood than I. So I think when we talk about unlikely allies, we need to think about our own biases and be open to receiving unlikely allies. Sometimes, especially me being as a woman of color, I'm so focused on the issues that affect me and don't sometimes appreciate or realize the issues that affect others that might be going around us. Yes, I've been in the room when I'm a Generation X, so I've been in the room when they're talking about millennials and they're talking about, the generations that have come past me and come after me, and I've laughed about it. But I also have sometimes been that voice of reason and say, much like Nikki, that they're young just like we were young too, and that we need to give them a chance and we need to teach them if they don't know something, And so there are different ways that we can be allies and just speak up and recognize that even though we might be going through something, other people are going through something too. And discrimination against one group, if one group is being discriminated against, we have to fight against that discrimination because it will eventually affect us all. If we want to move forward in society, we have to lift others up as we are trying to, lift ourselves up. So, yes.
Yeah, so we can all get stuck in our own, what's happening in our own lives and where we're being perhaps discriminated against. But that, it's important to look to see who else is out there, what other groups are and how they're also being discriminated against. And how, I love that, how we're all going through this together and how it affects us all. How can we lift each other up? Yeah, yeah. Jose, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think I've been all over the map as far as being an ally, being in uncomfortable situations where I wish I would have been a better ally. I remember those more than anything else, right? Where you had a chance to stick up for somebody else in the way that you wish somebody would stick up for you. That's an interesting thing about when you're a person of color and you get to live the world from our perspective, maybe those are the times that stick out the most for you, that you go back and you say, I wish I would have stood up for somebody there. I'm always, one of the things that when it comes to being an ally in situations, there is so much. I like how Nikki and Marsha are talking about the younger generations, because I think that they teach me so much. Once again, I'm also a Gen Xer, and if you know who we are, you know who we are. We kind of had to, we were raised in a very special way, and grit was part of that whole kind of programming that we have. And I've learned so much from younger people, as far as I've really been inspired by younger people, how younger people are allies to each other. I have a young person at the house here. My son is 13 right now, and he is incredibly savvy when it comes to these things, and the way his empathy levels at this moment in his life, are incredible. And I'm learning all the time. I'll just to end up on this situation. I mean, I think allyship is about going out of your comfort zone, right? So it's really about having the courage within yourself, not necessarily a societal courage, but courage within yourself to get out of your comfort zone. And so I'm always looking for those moments when I think about allyship. I'm always thinking at those moments where I feel very uncomfortable, not necessarily. I'm uncomfortable about myself acting or not in that situation, or feeling that I'm being judgy about a situation. And that's usually a moment where I take a pause and I say, okay, what am I not understanding about what somebody else is going through at this moment? And how can I position myself in a way to support them, or at least give this some more thought?
Mm. Yeah, I love that you started off saying, thinking about times or maybe feeling, I think you said feeling bad, but maybe that you didn't stand up for a time when you could have, or maybe you didn't stand up in the right way. And I think that we all feel that way. I know I certainly do. And, maybe I didn't speak up when I could have, or should have, or said the right things. But I think that there's so much learning going on, and it's an opportunity for forgiveness of ourselves as well. So I think that's really important. I think that's, Nikki, you kind of touched on that part of what Nita talks about. It's not being critical, and it's not necessarily standing up on a bully pulpit, although one certainly could, but it's just finding those opportunities to intervene when it's the right thing to do. And that, we can always learn. Nikki, I see you. Did you want to jump in there? I see there's a question. I'll come back to the question.
Just really quickly to build on that, I've watched this several times, and every single time when she says this has nothing to do with us, that is like, to me, the butterfly effect. Because to go to what Jose was saying, when I feel that like, ooh, I should maybe say something or at least check on that person, that is affecting me. It might not be because, you know, I'm a white person. It might be somebody, you know, anything, a child, a disabled, whatever. But that there, it does have something to do with me. That is the thing that could set the thing in motion. And so while the injustice might not be my injustice, dealing with it does have something to do with me. So I think that that's a really good point that we're kind of, I think, all connecting to here. And I really like that.
Yeah. So there's a question in the Q&A. It says, I've recently listened to Nice White Parents. While unlikely allies may be helpful if they join with humility and empathy, what about those instances where volunteer allies seek to lead or take over rather than joining hands with those experiencing the injustices? Anybody want to respond to that one?
I have struggled with that in some situations where people seem to want to take over and seem to say they know better than what I've gone through or what someone else has gone through. And I think in dealing with that, allies really need to listen, be willing to be open to exactly what other people are going through, not come into a situation and say, I have this idea, we can do this better, but be willing to be open to other ideas and listen to the perspective from those who are feeling discriminated against or injustice. I see it happen when people think they know better. Basically, that's what I'm saying. When they know better and they think their ideas are number one. I don't mind people coming in and sharing ideas, you know, because sometimes we're not afforded the opportunity to be, and this is a Hamilton reference, be in the room where it happens. You might be able to be in that room where it happens, but I want to be assured that when you're in that room, that you understand and the perspective of where I'm coming from, and your ideas are not being stated, but you're stating the collective, because it takes more than one person or one idea to move things forward. So yes, I've struggled with that, but I think sometimes if people are open and that they are willing to listen, they get back on course, you know, and become really an ally and not just be someone who wants to be a leader and take over the situation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So it's really about listening to what the needs are, not sort of jumping in with your own thought of what it should be if you're not necessarily sharing that experience, but listening to what it is that the person or that particular community is looking for and being open to sharing ideas. Mm-hmm.
I love this question because it gets to some of the hearts of the matter of what we're talking about. And I really appreciate the question. And I also appreciate the how delicate a matter it is, because I know these are sticky situations and people want to know how they can help, how they can interact, what's too little, what's too much. And I think that can be a nerve-wracking type of experience for everybody involved. I'm gonna allow these panels allow some of us a little bit of hubris, which we never get the type of hubris that these types of panels allow us. So I'm gonna take a little bit of that. And one of the things that happens I'm talking specifically here about people of color, but I'm talking about my experience as a person of color. And one of the things that I think is important to understand, as far as if we're talking about something like oppression of people of color or discrimination, is when you're a person of color and you have to go through life basically with those systems, with the systems that are there that are kind of holding you down to a certain degree, if you'll allow me to feel that way, right? Is that you become an expert both in the way that you're oppressed, right? Just like anybody else in the audience, you understand, you know, when a particular system is kind of holding you down, you become an expert emotionally on what's happening to you. You have the right to those emotions and to your understanding of what's happening to you. But you also become an expert on the thing that's oppressing you, right? On the thing that's holding you down, because you may depend on that system and you've got to be on the lookout for that system. So these are areas you gain knowledge in these areas, right? You know about this stuff. You know what it is to walk through the world as a Latino male or as a Black woman, or you understand that because you're living that, but you also gain a fundamental understanding of the systems that are in place that are creating your lack of accessibility to things and discrimination. So as a person in these, or as a woman, right? I was using ethnicity, but the same thing every woman in the audience right now understands exactly what I'm talking about, which is like knowing how you feel about the situation and understanding, you know, how patriarchy kind of works in order to make you feel that way. So what gets really, where one can get emotional about these things, and then it's yet another moment where we have to navigate these emotions, is when somebody wants to help, but they come in with their apparent expertise on these issues that we take very personally, right? Because we have our own, every individual has their own expertise on where their emotions are coming from or where their perspective is coming from. But also we have an understanding of what the systems are in place that are kind of holding us down. So yes, reactions, we can be very, sometimes we can be very passionate about the reactions that we have when those situations occur. But it's coming from a place of kind of human frustration, in the sense of like, look, I really appreciate what you're trying to do, but these are things that I've been studying for a really long time now, because this is the lab in which this stuff has been going on, and I'm somewhat of an expert. So I think that's just it's a way of kind of explaining what the emotions behind some of those reactions are.
Yes, those are very emotional excuse me, very emotional reaction, because you live it. You live with the system, whatever these systems are that are holding you back as a Latin man, or Marsha, you back as a Black woman, or Nikki and I as white women, or anybody that's in the audience that's being held back in some way. So yeah, you're sort of sparks your emotions, and as you say, you kind of become an expert on the system, on those systems that are holding you back. And it's, you know, sometimes hard to tease those apart, especially when someone else wants to jump in and tell you how it should be or how they think you should respond.
Delicate balance. You know, when you have people coming in who want to be your ally, you also have to examine yourself and check yourself to make sure that your biases are not getting in the way of allowing others to be allies. So it's definitely a delicate balance. And because of your perceptions, you might perceive that person as taking over, but in actuality, they are trying to share their ideas. So sometimes you have to look within, and it's a two-way street. Be willing to communicate, and hopefully both people or both groups would be able to hear each other's stories and empathize with each other.
Right. To empathize, to listen and to be empathetic. So there's a couple comments in the chat that have come through too. Just wanted to relay those. Somebody says, you know, I think it must have been right after the talk, never thought of looking at the situation the way she, I guess, Nita presented it. It might not affect you directly, but indirectly it may. And we've sort of been touching on that. in different ways. And Nikki, you made the point that you might not feel like it's touching you, but you still take it home, you still take it in, or how you feel about it. So Nikki, did you want to jump in here?
Well, I listened to Nice White Parents also, and I could what kept coming to me, to go back to Marsha's point, perception is all of it. And one of my kind of mainstays in the communication field is no one has a monopoly on the truth. We only know what we think and feel. And so when we feel that kind of like, wait a minute, you're taking over, or this isn't right, or there's some kind of tension, it's a super difficult conversation to have, but that's a really great starting point to say, I see you're trying to help, here's the kind of help I need. But when I was listening to Nice White Parents and I'm thinking about kind of trying to be an ally to people, I think of like a parent trying to help a child tie their shoes, which if you've ever had to do it is a very infuriating thing. But if you step back and you let them figure it out and you're there to kind of guide, when they get it, it's this great moment, and for them and for you to see it, and you're there and you taught them, and I feel like when I was listening to Nice White Parents, but even just in general, when someone's trying to be an ally and they end up taking over, but on purpose or by accident, having that second to say, wait a minute, this is really their thing, and I will better serve them by helping, not taking over. As a woman, I can, give you many examples of when male people have done that to me, brothers and colleagues and that kind of thing. But it's not even about that. It's just even the best of intentions. When I feel like someone's kind of crossed over and now it's their thing, and it's really hard, but every time I've been able to say, hey, I super appreciate it. I get that you are the go-to person for this. Let me give it a shot, and I will come right to you when I feel like I'm floundering. And honestly, every time I'm able to say some version of that, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when I am able to, we all come away feeling proud of the moment, whatever that is, tying our shoes, whatever the thing is. And I think that it's a really hard thing, but I to connect to Marsha's point and kind of build on it, when people are able to say it's just perception and we don't have a monopoly on the truth, we have to have those conversations to say, what are your identified bias? What are you, how can we move together in this moment? I think that's so important for a starting point for working through these really challenging issues.
Yeah. And part of what you were alluding to is giving the power back to the person and letting them figure it out, letting them make their own sort of aha moment, and then figuring out where they can go from there to get engaged. Okay, so second question. Nita Mosby Tyler replies to an injustice she encounters with the example, "Excuse me, let that little girl dance." This might sum up the sentiment, but not everyone would deliver the message in the same way. How can people respond to an unjust situation, or have you seen an effective way that someone or yourself responded to an unjust situation? Marsha.
So sometime in my previous life, I represented children in foster care. So sometimes we would be in the courtroom, or in the courthouse, and I would be in the courtroom, and other people would be outside. And I remember this one particular incident where the child was interacting with a parent, and the child did something the parent didn't like, and the parent tried to discipline the child, but the discipline was totally inappropriate. And so a person, not a party to the case, but just a bystander, simply walked in between the parent and the child to intervene, to give some space between the two, while someone else went to get the social worker. So it's simple actions. From simple actions to extreme actions, people can respond to injustice. simply by standing next to a person and being a support and showing that person that you're there for them and trying to direct that attention, their attention to you, can prevent an injustice, or somebody who's berating a person can de-escalate the situation. So it doesn't have to be some heroic effort. It can be a simple act where, like I said, you are there for that person. A simple act of, and I know we all have cell phones, but videoing the situation and you never know, it might be used to exonerate a person or help that person. But speaking out and saying, no, what you're saying is wrong, those simple things, and it's not simple to the person who is experiencing the injustice, it's monumental for that person because it shows someone cares and someone stepped in on my behalf when I couldn't speak up for myself. So those are some of the examples that I have seen.
Yeah, that's a delicate, touchy one too, though, because it's a child-parent relationship. And I think we've all witnessed exchanges, even in the grocery store, that are you cringe because it just doesn't seem like the child is being treated appropriately. And yeah, so how and when is it appropriate to intervene, and how to do that in a way that is respectful, but also gives the child, in this case, that space. I think that's that's a tough one. Yeah, I know, Nikki, this is kind of your field of communication and how you intervene with things. I mean, you of course do many other things, but what's your thought on that?
So to me, it's there's an element of being assertive here, and that is super hard part of communication is being able to be assertive on your own behalf. So trying to do that for other people is really challenging. I really love in the talk when she says, always be on the lookout. I kind of picture somebody with a cape on, almost like a superhero. But I really, when we're able to show someone, and I like what Marsha's saying too, just standing by someone. I've certainly had those moments pass, and then later said to the person, like, I saw that and I'm sure it was awful and I feel for you. Or watch other people kind of come up after and say, they kind of were being mean to you, are you okay? And I think when people are able to, even if the moment is too big, but you see the thing, I think starting, if this feels like an uncomfortable place for you to broadcast it in front of everybody, going up to that person and saying, I saw this thing happen and it's really terrible. I think that could be a really great way to help yourself build that confidence to be able to be that unlikely ally. And it's because you see the appreciation, success begets success. But it's just the assertiveness is the main part, and figuring that out and baby steps into it are important. So even if it's the moment's passed you by, you didn't say anything, and you're driving home, you're like, oh my gosh, I totally missed the boat on that one, or I wish I had said, I wish I had done. That is not, that feeling of sort of regret doesn't need to be where it stops. What would you say? Say the script in your head. I wish I had said this. What if they said that? What if somebody else did this? Play out the scenarios, because the more you do that, the better you'll be prepared for the next time. And maybe you'll miss the boat a little bit the next time too, but you'll still be more prepared. We create scripts for all kinds of conversations. When we're ordering pizza, when we have to call someone and have a difficult conversation, we create all of these scripts. This should just be another script you create to kind of help yourself prepare for those moments. When they go by, it's still learning, it's still self-discovery. And you really, when you get that message, no matter what it is, no matter what the message is, if you get it right for your internal communication, it is so, for how you're talking to yourself, I always call it your Jiminy Cricket. Some people will know generation-wise, but when you get that inner voice saying a linear, cohesive message to whatever it is, the more you practice it, the better it will be when you actually say it. Don't wait in that fight or freeze reaction. can kind of take the wind out of that moment for you. But that's okay. That's still a learning moment. But I think that when you see those, when the situation's done and you're walking home, driving home, you're sitting on your couch later and you're like, oh man, I totally missed it. What, great. How are you going to make it better next time? And I think that's that moment of self-discovery is the first step to kind of create that ripple.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like replaying the dialogue and figuring out the script. And as you said, we all have scripts going on all the time, but you know, how would I handle this differently? I also love that you said, even if you miss the big moment in it, to step in and intervene, you can still express empathy and compassion for to and for the passion that the person that has been impacted.
Yeah.
So,
because other people are watching, so other people will see this is how we do it, and that, I mean, you're kind of like a meta ally at that point. I mean, you're just all kinds of levels are happening.
Yeah. Now, Jose, you've got what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I love both what Marcia and Nikki have said, because I think that one of the things that we get from Nita Mosby's talk is that, yes, we're all able to look back at the ballet teacher from decades ago who was courageous enough to do what she did, and we all applaud that, because with our understanding now of the past, we're all in agreement that what was going on in the past is a bad thing. And yet at the things that are going on in our present, they're a little bit messier for us. We don't know. And I love Marcia's example, because that's an example of where, like, do I act? Do I not act? Or what do I do? And there was that, number one, the courage in that type, in a very public situation, in a situation that maybe somebody should not get into or should not intervene, of somebody stepping up. And then Nikki also kind of giving us the idea of like, hey, even if you don't know what to do, or even if you don't know anything, that's a moment where that might be a time for introspection that will allow you to prepare for those moments better. The thought that I had of those moments, right, is that, so for example, we've been going nationally, we've seen, there's been a lot of tumult nationally. There's been a lot of, there's been protests and there's been marches and one of the things that this makes me think about, for example, is it makes me think in the way that the idea of looting was kind of politicized, right, through the election and whatnot. This idea of looting was some of the things that people could, in a certain way, not necessarily even take sides, but that was one of those situations where you have human beings doing something within a protest, and then you immediately have people that are pouring judgments into something that's going on, their emotional reaction to somebody. And in the discussions that I had with different people, I have a family just like everybody else's, that everybody has an opinion about what's good and what's bad. And one of the things that I thought about, as far as the people that were completely against the looting and how could the looting be happening and all of these things, is that in the discussions where we ended up is we lacked, or the people that reacted that way in a way lacked the introspection to try to begin to understand where those people were coming from, right? And it doesn't mean that you're going to become an ally for the looters necessarily, but it becomes, you can become an ally you can become an ally by simply trying to understand what would drive somebody to do something like that in that situation. So you give people back their humanity enough. You understand that these are people like you and me, like everybody else. And you have these moments where you begin to recognize other people's humanity. And I think it's through that humanity that you may get a glimpse at, even if you don't know what to do, right? And even about something that you thought you felt one way or another, through kind of taking that pause and seeing what your body is doing emotionally, taking a pause and being introspective enough to say, why do I feel the way I do about that? Or why do I feel the guilt that I feel about about doing something? Or why do I feel angry that somebody else did something and they're getting all this credit now for it, where I thought so? It's all of these emotions is just being, I promise you that half the work that we're trying to talk about, like we're talking about good work tonight, right? Is like being an ally is good work. And I promise you that half of that good work has everything to do with just a little bit more introspection, of just thinking about things a little bit and thinking, why would, I don't understand why my students are complaining about this stuff, right? And it's like, but there's a lot of them complaining about this stuff. So what's the work that I need to do in order to begin to, I'm more of a fan of compassion than I am empathy, right? I mean, empathy, sometimes we can feel what other people feel, but it limits what we can do sometimes because we're just, but how can I be compassionate enough to begin to get to a point where going back to what Nikki was saying, even before even before what Marsha was talking about, is like that I can at least stand next to somebody and be like, look, I'm not sure I fully understand both what just happened and my reaction, but man, I want to give this a shot. I'm just going to sit here for a second, take a deep breath, hang with you, and let's see what happens 30 seconds from now after we've thought about this for a second.
That takes so much courage, doesn't it? So much courage to do that. As you said, that's that introspection, and it's that, that willingness to, even somebody who's doing something completely egregious, to recognize the humanity in that person and maybe try to understand why they're doing what they're doing. But Marsha, I see you want to jump in.
So when Nikki was speaking about scripts and rehearsing, and thinking about an incident after it might have occurred, it just made me think about, young people and how we're never too old to learn, but it just made me reflect in regards to, we teach our children, I know I teach my children, or my child, I only have one, how to act or how to act in certain situations. We try to role play. So if you see somebody who's being bullied, what would you do? If you see somebody who is talking bad about another person because of a disability or their race, what would you do? And we need to do that for ourselves as well, because it's about being prepared and thinking about these situations, and it's about growing, and like Nikki said, thinking about what you would do next time. You might not be in that exact same situation, but what will you do if you're in a similar situation? How can you respond? And even going back and talking with friends about, I've experienced this. I was in a store and you would never believe that this happened. What would you do? How should I have responded? It's educating the people around you and hopefully making them also think about what they would do in a certain situation. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I think, for me, having been involved in the big conversations that Calvert has done and we did through the Mediation Center in St. Mary's, that's been such a learning opportunity for me too, because I hearing stories of how people are being treated and oppressed and discriminated against in my lifetime, in my neighborhood. It's one thing to say, well, my gosh, that was, the ballet teacher, that was, how many years ago, but no, this is happening today. And I think, to your point, it's about educating ourselves too, and being understanding that, we're all on different aspects of this path, but I kind of love that, you talked about Jose, about being introspective and being compassionate, and Marsha about educating and doing the role plays, and Nikki about the scripts. I see you've just got a couple minutes more. There's a question in here in the Q&A. It says, the TED Talk suggests that unlikely allies need to act with love and courage. How do we encourage or teach our young people to be effective allies? We're kind of touching on that. And how do we encourage courage that is thoughtful and careful, not reckless? How do we teach about John Lewis's good trouble within our schools and religious institutions and scouts, etc.? Can those scripts be taught? It's a great question.
It's a great question. And, I've always been involved with young people. My passion is young people. And so, and having a 13-year-old like Jose has a 13-year-old, you know, you see those moments when their eyes are wide open and they might be looking at the news and seeing the injustice, and they have a strong opinion. And those times when they come to you and talk with you about how they're feeling is a perfect opportunity to model or to discuss how to react in certain situations and talk about how to get into good trouble, and how that sometimes that when you're doing the right thing or when you want to do the right thing, some people might not perceive it as such. They might say, you know, why are you getting involved in this? Peer pressure is tremendous among the youth. So you definitely have to be open to having the conversations with the young people, but also model good behavior, model how you want young people to interact with others, be that role model in that community. My son is involved in Scouts. So sometimes there's opportunities where you're talking about when you're earning a merit badge, like citizenship in the community and citizenship in the world, how to be a good citizen in your community, how to be a good citizen in the world. There are opportunities when you're interacting with young people where you can broach the subject. They are so eager to learn, especially, you know, we've been home and there's nothing but stuff on the TV. And it's a good opportunity to start the dialogue. Even with 3-year-olds, toddlers, it's a good opportunity to start that dialogue, teaching them how to share, teaching them how to be compassionate. When they're going off to school, they're teaching them that they're not going to be people who look like you. There might be someone who, you know, has a disability, or someone who is different, accepting those differences and preparing them to deal with the world. We can't just sit quietly by anymore and just try and let them figure it out. We have to spark that conversation, and we have to be the role models that we want to see in our children.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Just finding the opportunity to have those conversations and being that role model for not just the community, but for the world at large. Yeah, that's so important. Nikki.
So to kind of go right with what Marsha's saying, I am extremely honest with my kids. I always have been. They're 9 and 12 now, but they have asked me questions about all kinds of stuff. And I start out by saying, this is going to be weird for both of us, but we're going to have this talk. You're asking the question, I'm going to give you the answer. But one thing that I agree, it's never too soon. We always, when they were little, reading books, pointing out, how do you think this person feels? There's the drawings and the illustrations. The people that are left out, or the animals, or whatever it is it's being, there's always something. And how do you think they feel? Have you ever felt that way? What if you were in this story? What would you do to kind of help this person? So helping them kind of role play in that way, because it's really great when they come to you with questions, because okay, I know exactly what conversation we need to have here, but sometimes it doesn't always present itself that way. So I think pointing out in books, or pointing out when you see other people do it. So I am in Calvert County, but I grew up just north of Baltimore. So we are in the Inner Harbor a lot. And so there's lots of opportunities to see lots of diversity and people interacting. But when we see somebody give somebody else a chicken sandwich that they just bought from McDonald's, I point it out and I say, how do you think they feel about that? How do you think this person feels giving that other one a sandwich? How do you think that person feels getting it? How do you think you would feel if you were either of those people? So it doesn't even have to be, it can just be in the world. Somebody holding a door open for somebody else. What do you think about that? Have you ever done that? How did it make you feel when you did that? And I think that those kinds of things can start creating those moments of reflections for them, so that when the moment passes them, they have something to hold on to create that script. I think that's really important. It's never, ever, ever too soon. And you can say, this is going to feel weird for both of us, but this is a really important conversation. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. I used to say to my daughter, I'm gonna give you an answer. I want to tell you just enough, maybe a little more than you want to hear, and stop me when you need to. Well, I see we're coming up on 8 o'clock. I feel like this could, I mean, I would love to have another hour talking about this. So thank you so much. But I just want to finish, just echoing Nita Mosby Tyler's comments, and the things that you all have been saying is that it takes introspection, it takes compassion, it takes, if you're not comfortable, the role play, the modeling, the behavior, the script, the internal script, and then the stepping up when and where you can to be those unlikely allies. So as she says, justice counts on all of us. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to Christine, and she'll finish us out.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining us, and Christine for you facilitating. I very much appreciate it. So seeing as we're with the library, we love to talk about books. So I just want to mention that we have a reading challenge that's going on all the way through May. It's called Read Woke, and it encourages people to learn about different underrepresented groups by either reading about them or reading authors that fall into that group. And you can find out more about it by visiting the library's website. Each month is a different group, as I said. November, it is November now, is African Americans, and then each month it's something different. So it challenges you to learn about them and to do some of what we were talking about tonight about introspection. I'm also going to be emailing out everybody who registered for this a resource page that has some books that we recommend for finding out more and thinking about how you look at this issue. And it also will have a few TED Talks on there because there are so many good ones, but there are 4 others in particular that we thought were relative to this. So I think that's everything I have, and I would just like to thank all of our, Catherine, yes.
If it's okay, I'm just going to put a link to our program survey in the chat. If everyone doesn't mind, we would love to have you fill it out. It really does help us figure out how to improve our programming, and we can say, hey, this was great. We want to do this sort of thing again. So if you don't mind, it's down there. It's just a quick couple questions.
Oh, thanks. And it will take us a couple of days to get the recording available on our the library's YouTube channel, but I'll include that in the link when I email out the resources if people would like to watch this again. Okay. Well, thank you all, and I wish you all a good night.
Thank you so much. Good night.